Hello everybody, thank you for joining me again today. We are going to begin part one of our Ghost Rider drawing, and it's a simple head and torso. Ghost Rider's giving us the thumbs up, and we're just going to do the pencil sketch today, and then in part two we're going to do the inking stage. But it's head and torso. We need to leave room for his fiery skull, so we're going to drop the head down a little bit and put it right about here, and it's about, I don't know, 2 inches high or 3 inches high, maybe 2 inches wide, something like that. It's just an oval, and then right close to his skull is going to be his fist, and he's giving us the thumbs up, okay, as Ghost Rider does sometimes. Ghost Rider is the spirit of vengeance, after all. He made a couple movies about Ghost Rider back in the early 2000s, starring Nicolas Cage. I don't know if you know anything about the character, but Johnny Blaze was a stunt rider, motorcyclist, and he made a deal with the devil in order to save his father's life from cancer. And I don't think it worked, from what I remember. Dad still died. But then Johnny Blaze refused to do the work of the devil, but retained his power, and is called the spirit of vengeance, and now exacts vengeance on evildoers. And he's been a member of the Champions, a short-lived team back in the 70s. He's been with the Avengers from time to time on some adventures. But the fist we're doing, okay, it's just a rectangle, basically. And then this rectangle is separated into four equal sections, one for each finger. And then the pinky is a little bit right there. The knuckles on the back side are like hills, and it goes up and down, the valley and the peak. And it sits at the top of each finger. And then the thumb kind of goes up right from the top of that. It's built like a tree initially, and wide at the bottom, and then narrow at the top. Over the front of his fingers is this like brass knuckles, basically. And these brass knuckles have sharp spikes on them. His entire gauntlet and his jacket, like a biker jacket, has spikes on them. These spikes are coming forward, so all we see is the circle of the spike. We don't see the point of the spike, and so you draw 4 equal circles going right down. You can use a circle graph for this, or you can just freehand it. And then all we see, there's this little reflection going down each side that kind of show that this is supposed to be a pointy object instead of just a circular object. Okay. All right. Pretty much it. I'm going to make this one just a little bit bigger. And then we're going to move over here to the skull. The thumb, if we're kind of looking at the relationship between the fist and the skull, the chin is about the 3rd finger, the thumb is into the forehead, and then the eyes are obviously in the middle of the head. Now, we understand the proportions of the human face. The eyes are about halfway, the head is 5 eyes wide, the distance between the eyes is the length of one eye. The skull is a little bit different because he doesn't have eyes, he has eye sockets. We're still going to put them, not too close together. And because he has no eyes, a couple of artists through the years have tried to draw him with red eyes. It just doesn't look really good. And so most artists have just chosen to go with the blank black eye sockets. And in this one, it's kind of interesting because he's giving us a wink. So this eye socket is a little bit thinner than this one over here. And he obviously has no eyebrows, but he does have eye ridges. And so it's always kind of interesting to find out ways where a skull can express emotion. He doesn't do he does one emotion real well, and that's kind of like anger and vengeance, and he's always supposed to look scary, and a flaming skull, I would imagine, kind of always looks pretty darn scary. But if we slant those eyes down just a little bit, make them look a little bit meaner, give him his eye ridges. His nose is not really a nose, but it's a nose socket. And line of symmetry, still kind of important between the eyes. We'll line up the nose socket, we'll line up the teeth when we get down there. And we'll ink this in, but I'm just going to go ahead and pencil these eye sockets in so we can kind of see what's supposed to be light, what's supposed to be dark. And then, okay, let's back up a little bit. Before we do the teeth, we're going to do kind of the structure of the face. And he has very high angular cheekbones. And that's going to help give him his character a little bit. High and angular. And then it kind of chucks in a little bit. And then there's a space between the nose before the teeth. Line of symmetry. His mouth will be kind of in a smile, so we're going to make the space between the teeth curve up a little bit. And ordinarily, I wouldn't tell you to draw the teeth individually, but in this case, because it's a skull, we kind of have to. And I always start in the middle, do the first two, and then add one on each side, add another one on each side, and then follow the line up. So I think I'm going to do a total of 10, 5 to the left, 5 to the right. They don't have to be perfect. And then we'll do the bottom row. The bottom row, a little bit smaller than the top. And then again, just work from the center out. And about same thing, 5 on the bottom, 5 to one side, 5 on the other. He's got these little spaces between the cheekbone and the jawbone. And then very thin, it tucks in from the cheekbone and then works your way down. And give him a pretty substantial jaw with a pretty substantial chin, because that will kind of help make it look like a complete skull. Lines and crevices, some shadow. Okay, and we're not going to do the top of the skull, because the top of the skull is going to be fire. So we're going to show that in a minute. I'm going to erase my oval, no longer need it. Skull is in the right place. I'm going to kind of look at the relationship between the fist and the skull a little bit before I move on to the flames. He's got this biker jacket. He's had kind of the same dark blue biker jacket for years. When he first came out in 1973, it was like a dark blue, light blue combination, and then it slowly evolved to have spikes and became black and things like that. But so this part of the collar kind of ties together your fist and the side of your skull. And then this jacket kind of works in a couple of different ways. We see a little bit of just his spine before we see this neck covering come across and then angles down. And then his other collar on his other side kind of comes out just a little bit. Now, when we color this, it'll be relatively easy in that it just goes white, yellow, and orange. The further away you get from the skull, the darker the value becomes. And when you do flames, the best thing that I can recommend is that you hold your pencil kind of halfway and use a very irregular line. Don't try to be too curvy. You want the flames to look like flames. You don't want it to look like water. And if it's too curvy, it just starts to look like smoke rather than fire. So you can have some curves in it, but to have those little flames in part of the bigger flame. And so he has this interior flame just off the skull. And then he has a bigger one, and it may look like it kind of comes right out of the thumb. I'm going to tuck mine in a little bit. And just keep working your way up. So it's going to go off the page slightly, and that's okay. He's got a little secondary flame, kind of like right there. And then on this side of the collar, kind of comes around. Like so. Okay, so it's a very irregular line with some corners to it. Yes, it has some curves, and the curves are generally inward, and you want everything to kind of work its way out like fire does as it consumes wood or whatever it is that's burning. In this case, it's eternal hellfire. All right, so we've done a couple components. We've got the skull, we've got the fire, we've got the fist. I'm going to add a little bit more to his jacket here. It's going to be part of his shoulder. This part kind of cuts in front, so the collar's here, and then he has this other part that cuts across his chest this way. So it's like multifaceted. It's, you know, padded in that motorcycle stunt riders need padding if they should wipe out. Johnny Blaze wiped out on occasion. He has his signature chain. Okay, and when it's not being used, it's around his shoulder and around his chest. And so the way we're going to start that is just to kind of start from the third finger and then have an S curve that kind of comes down. And a chain is just a repeated pattern. And by repeated pattern, it's an open link followed by a closed link. And you want them to roughly be the same size so that it's a consistent pattern. But I'm going to start with 4 parallel lines, and this is the open link, and then the closed link is just like a bullet. It's just 2 parallel lines. And again, roughly the same length. And as you do, each link by itself has to be straight. But if you're trying to curve something, every time you add a link, you just turn it slightly. So in order to turn the chain, don't bend the link. Bend the next link slightly more, if that makes sense. So one open, one closed, one open, one closed. I'm going to have another one open. And then in the middle here, you have like a clasp where the chain comes together. So he can clasp and unclasp the chain, but when it's closed around his chest, he doesn't have to worry about it falling off. And this is just a cylinder with some cross contour lines. And then we go with another open link down here. Make sure everybody can see that okay. And I think I got room for one more. So again, just a repeated pattern. Mostly rounded rectangles. Open, closed, open, closed. It just repeats that pattern. And then we just throw this little clasp here in the middle. And that's going across his chest. So because it's going across his chest, and we have a pretty bright light source with the fiery skull, there's going to be some strong shadows on his chest and his fist and his hand as well. Okay, so we're making pretty good progress here. Hope you guys are keeping up okay. This is going to go across the chest here. This is going to go down this way. And okay, so with the fist, he is also wearing a gauntlet. We don't see the shoulder because the shoulder is directly behind the hand, but we do see this gauntlet, which is this large metal piece that goes along his entire forearm. And this is kind of a new ad. When they retroed him in the 90s, that's when he came out with all the spikes and stuff like that. And you have this large circle which represents the widest part of the forearm, and then you have these concentric circles which kind of come in a little bit smaller, like dropping a rock in a pond. And these just different sections of metal going backwards to cover the entire forearm. All right, yeah. Make sure I cover that part of my drawing so I don't mess it up. He has a series of spikes going down the length of his gauntlet. He first has some spikes on the top of his fingers, but he also has some spikes on the back of his hand. And so I would do those first. The way we represent depth on this is to do the spikes in front first, and then the spikes in back is second, so that we can show depth. And it's the overlapping that allows us to do that. I'm going to start at the top, and we go with the front spike, and it's just a triangle. And then right behind it is the next one. So we don't draw a separate one. We draw one that is partially hidden by the one in front. And then we draw a third. So that way it's overlapping and it looks like they're like three ducks in a row. We're going to do that going up. We're going to do this going to the side. And when you do the one in the front, do a slight curve on the bottom, because these are cones after all. The true shape, the true three-dimensional shape is a cone, not just a triangle. We don't want to go straight across at the bottom. That'll flatten our form a little bit. We go again, 1, 2, 3. It's okay if they get slightly smaller in the background. That shows greater depth, because as things go into the distance, they get smaller. That's the way perspective works. There's another row, so go 1, 2, 3. And then another one right behind it, and another one right behind that. row down here. And these, instead of going off to the left, we're going to go the other way. And there's one other small set of spikes going off to the side right there. So in total, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. I got 4 in the back of his hand, 4 on the top of his fingers. So a lot of spikes, and he also has some spikes on his shoulder over here. Won't see any here because of the collar and the fire. I could possibly maybe see one just kind of poking up right there. Just to keep it balanced. You know, that's important. All right, we're almost finished here. We've got the fist, we've got the gauntlet, we've got the skull, we've got the flames. We have the chain going across his chest. Now we just have to kind of finish up his body. And the Ghost Rider is a unique character. He's a flaming skeleton in essence. But when he has his jacket on, it looks like he has a physique. If the jacket gets ripped or destroyed, we see the skeleton underneath. But when he has his jacket on, we see his muscles. And he's a fairly well-endowed stunt cyclist. And so he's got these muscles on. These lines here are just design elements of the jacket itself. And remember, we're going to be inking this. So when we draw in the shapes, and I just put X's in order to remind myself what's going to be solid black when I get to the inking process. So this is going to be like the bottom shadow area of his chest, and that chest is going to move over to the other side, and that's going to be black as well. And then, so again, the strong light source of the flames will give us a lot of ability to create contrast with our tones and our values. And then just double check things that I may have missed. I think we're pretty good there. Got his neck, got some values up here. Again, X's to represent black. Little values here on the jacket. This collar will be mostly black, so I'm just going to put some X's there. When we color the metal, it's going to be largely white and light blue with a little gray. So we're going to work on that combination when we get to that. But there's going to be, like I said, strong contrast between the lights and the darks on this one. All right, well, I think that brings us to our close of our sketch of this particular piece. Part 2 of our video series, we will do the inking, and then part 3 we will do the coloring. So thank you very much for joining me. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to our channel. So thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.